Hello students, today I am going to discuss with you about a capital structure. This is a second chapter under financial management. We have finished with the first chapter wherein we have studied what are the meaning, definition, functions, scope and growing importance of financial management. This is a second chapter, that is capital structure. Now let us see what is the meaning of capital structure and what does the capital structure means. The relative proportion of various sources of fund used in a business is termed as financial structure. Uh, as you know, the funds are raised from various sources. Now to mention about the various sources, they are debentures, equity shares, preference shares, bonds, loans, etc. Together we call it as a financial structure. We have different proportion of funds raised from different sources. Okay, so some portion raised from debentures, some from equity, some from preference, some from loans, some from bonds. So totally we call it as a financial structure. Okay, so capital structure is a part of financial structure and refers to the proportion of various long-term source or funds, various long-term sources of finance. Now what is this capital structure? Capital structure is a part of financial structure and refers to the proportion of various long-term source of finance. What is the proportion of long-term finance used? Proportion in the sense like 100%, the funds are 100%, 20% from equity, 25% from debentures, 30% from equity, like that. So how much proportion of each source of finances they have raised from the public is called as a capital structure. It is concerned with making the array of the sources of funds in a proper manner, which is in relative magnitude and proportion. So what is the proportion of each funds and which are used by the concern, which are raised by the concern in each of the magnitude. All these we study under the capital structure. Okay. So capital structure, the simple meaning of capital structure, it is a part of financial structure and refers to the proportion of various long-term funds, sources of financing. So what is the proportion of sources of financing from various sources is termed as a capital structure. The capital structure of a company is made up of debt, equity securities that comprises the firm's financing of its asset. Okay, it is a permanent financing of the firm represented by the long-term debt, preferred stocks and net worth. So it is related to the management of capital and excludes the short-term borrowings. It denotes some degree of permanency as it excludes short-term source of finance. Here, capital structure includes a long-term source of finance. From where do they raise the funds? What are the sources of raising the funds? What are the long-term sources? The proportion of all those things, we call it as a capital structure. So capital structure is a permanent financing of a firm represented by long-term debt, preferred stock and net worth. So the combination of the three is called as a capital structure. It includes the short-term borrowings. Short-term borrowings of the concern are being excluded here. It is not being taken into account. Okay, only the long-term source of finance is taken into account. Now let us see what is the definition of capital structure. Capital structure is a mixture of long-term source of funds used by the firm. It is made up of debt, equity securities and refers to the permanent financing of the firm. It is composed of long-term debt, preference share capital and shareholders fund. Okay, so it is a mixture of long-term funds. So short-term funds are excluded in the capital structure. Only the long-term source of finance is being taken. And the long-term finance sources of finance includes equity, debt, preference shares and permanent stock or permanent financing of the firm. the long-term debt, preference share capital, and shareholders fund. All this plays a very important part in the capital structure of the concern. Now let us see the next one. Let us see the another definition given by different scholars, that is P. Chandra. Let us see, according to him, what is the meaning of capital structure? Capital structure is essentially concerned with how the firm decides to divide its cash flows into two broad components: a fixed component that is earmarked to meet the obligation towards debt capital, and a residual component that belongs to equity shareholders. So here, according to him, he decides, or he divides the cash flows into two components or two types. Okay, fixed components. Fixed components. Now fixed components means it will be remain, it meets the obligation. Okay, it fixed component like equity, it will be fixed in the concern unless and until you pay them or redeem the obligation. Till then it will be there with the firm. So a fixed component that is unmarked to meet the obligation towards debt capital, and a residual components that belongs to the equity shareholders. So residual components and the debt components. So all these things comprises a capital structure. So obligation towards debt capital and the equity shareholders. So this represents the capital structure of the concern. Next is pattern of capital structure. There are usually two sources of finance used by the firm: debt and equity. Debt and equity, these are the two components. Okay, a new company cannot collect sufficient funds as per the requirement, as it has to yield to establish its credit worthiness in the market. Consequently, they have to depend only on equity shares, which is a simple type of capital structure. After establishing its credit worthiness in the market, its capital structure gradually becomes complex. Okay, so what is a pattern of capital structure means what does the capital structure includes? As I've told you, it includes only the long-term source of finance, which may be debentures, bonds, then equity, preference shares, long-term loans. These are the part of the capital structure. Now, these are considered as a pattern of capital structure. According to the new company cannot collect sufficient as per the requirement, and it has to establish its own credit worthiness in the market. Like a new company, when it has started, it needs a fund, so it has to establish that credit worthiness, that they are able to pay. When they raise the money, they have the capacity to pay. That confidence they have to create in the market, unless and until the public will not invest in the company. So it is a responsibility of the company to make sure that whatever the money raised from them, they have the credit worthiness in the market to repay that amount on time. After establishing its credit worthiness in the market, its capital structure becomes complex. So it has to establish a credit worthiness of the market and prove that they are able to pay the money. Let us see what are the different patterns of capital structure. Here you can see the first one is equity shares and debentures, that is long-term debt including bonds, etc. Equity shares and preference shares. Then equity shares, preference shares and debentures. However, irrespective of the pattern of capital structure, a firm must try to maximize earnings per share for the equity shareholders and also the value of the firm. So they have to increase their capital structure, the value of the firm, and represents what they are going to do. So the pattern of capital structure includes equity shares and debentures. That is first point. Second point, equity shares and preference shares. Equity share, preference shares and debentures. So they can include all the three and form a particular capital structure. Now we are supposed to study in this chapter the different sources of raising the funds and what are its features, advantages, and disadvantage, like equity shares, debentures, preference shares, bonds. What are its features? What is the meaning of this? And what are the advantages and disadvantage of these sources? Let us see the first source of raising the funds from the public, that is debt. Let us see what is the meaning of debt and what does it mean. Okay, so debt financing is borrowing money from the third party. Debt is like a loan itself. A third party will give you a money, okay, provide you a money. You have given an offer or raised a request from your side to that particular party, to third party, to give a certain finance a certain amount of money. It may be a financial institutions like a banks, a mutual fund, cooperative societies, then venture capital, or any other financing institutions. They are able to provide funds to the company with the promise to return the principal with an agreed interest. What is the promise they make is they raise the money from the third party and they agree to repay the amount with the principal and agreed interest, with an agreed interest. Debt is a sum of money borrowed by one entity, namely the borrower, from another entity, namely the lender. Due to the unavailability of liquid cash, government and corporation, big and small, and individual often raise debt to make payment for varied purposes. So why do they raise the money? They raise the money from various sources: lenders, entity, corporation, government institutions, small and big, an individual, and often raise debt to make payment. Why do they raise the funds? To make a payment for varied purpose. For various purpose, they are raising the funds. Okay, so the fund debt is a sum of money borrowed by one entity, one organization. They borrow the funds and they distribute the funds to the various institutions. It includes governments, corporation, and individuals, wherein they raise the funds and repay the money. For instance, an organization may borrow from a bank or raise money from other sources to fund its working capital requirement. Another instance is a student purchasing an educational loan from a bank to fund his or her education. This is a form of contract which allows the borrower to borrow money with the condition that the money is to be paid back at a later date with added interest. So as we borrow different kinds of types of loans, we have even education loans. In the organization, we have working capital requirement. Working capital wherein they raise the funds from the public to meet the day-to-day expenses of the organization. For instance, a student purchasing an education loan from the bank to fund its education. To fund his education, they may be raising the funds from the bank, so that they have to repay those money. This is a form of contract which allows a borrower to borrow money with the condition that the money is paid back and a later date with added interest. This is how the money is paid back after a agreed period of time with a ready rate of interest. Government raises debt to cover their deficit finances, which help pay ongoing activities as well as major capital projects. These debt may be issued in the form of loans or by issuing bonds. The analysis to determine the cost of lending to a government is done by analyzing the ratio of debt to GDP. The ratio helps to assess the debt, due debt, and repayment capacity as well. So government raises debt to cover the deficit. Even government raises the debt. They have to raise the debt to meet its deficit financing. If they have any deficit, it has to be paid on time. So in order to do that, they raise the funds from the public, which helps to pay for ongoing activities as well as major capital projects. If they have to take up major capital projects, they have to they have to take up the debt and to meet the deficit of the government. They can raise those loans from the various lending governments or financial institutions. They provide a loan, and it is based on their debt to GDP. What is the debt and GDP? It is based on that. The ratio helps to assess how much debt they can raise from the public. To, in other words, to say in a simple word, what is debt? Debt is financing, is borrowing money from the third party, that is financial institution, with a promise to return the principal with an agreed interest. So this is what we have studied. What is the meaning of debt? It is like a loan which has to be repaid after a specified period of time. There are two types under the very will be secure debt and unsecured debt. Secure debt, you have to keep your certain asset as a pledge wherein until you repay the full amount. Unsecured means no security is pledged on behalf of your credit worthiness. The amount will be paid. The amount will be given by the financial institution to the company. So this is what debt means. In the next slide, recorded video, I will be discussing with you what is the features, what are the merits and demerits of debt, then equity as well as bonds. Okay, thank you.